I joined the Marines for two reasons. One was to enhance my professional development. So when I did come back and join the IRA, that I would, be well trained. And the other was to test my commitment, because I probably would have joined the IRA at 18. The IRA leadership actually, Martin McGuinness actually sent me to the States because I had an American accent.
Their use of informers has actually bitten deeply into the Republican organisations.
Well, I mean, the RUC would say that anyway.
On the whole, the men on the ground I had tremendous respect for.
You're either this or you're this.
Yeah.
Oh, hang on, we're cleverer than that.
Now more than 15 hardened terrorists have decided not to honour their friends, but to betray them. In the year of the informer, the conflict in Northern Ireland has simply moved into another savage phase.
John, how are you, sir?
I'm great, Chris. Thanks. Thank you very much. Good morning.
Yes, no, it's very kind you offered to come, or you agreed to come on the show. Thank you for your publishers for putting us in contact. How's the book doing? When did you publish it?
Well, it was published on September 6th, simultaneously in Ireland and in the UK. I mean, in Ireland, the UK, and the United States. There's different publishers for Ireland and for the US. And, the publishers are telling me it's going very well. They're very happy with the progress on it. I only found out the other day it's going to be published in Italian. And apparently there's negotiations on a few other languages as well. So we'll see how that goes. So that's a good sign. It's doing well when they're publishing it in another language.
I would have said, John, oh my God, like never going to be beast. No. And lo and behold, whatever it is, 10, 15 years later, it still seems to be holding.
Yeah.
Maybe we can explore that later after you've told your story.
Sure.
So did you grow up in the US?
I grew up in the United States. I was born in New York to Irish immigrant parents in 1957. My father was from County Roscommon and my mother was from Kerry, but they met in America. When I was born, my father was in the United States Air Force doing a 4-year stint. He joined the US Air Force to accelerate his American citizenship and to get some technical training, for work in that. But we moved to Chicago when I was about 2, and then I went to primary school there, and I moved back to Ireland in 1972 when I was about 14. I'd been in Ireland a few times in summer holidays before that and all, but I moved back to Ireland when I was 14, and I spent my teenage years in Roscommon and in Dublin, going to secondary school, and leading a pretty, conventional childhood. I loved Ireland, but I didn't have any, I didn't grow up in the North. I didn't have any Republican connections, any, political analysis that I developed on my own understanding, on my own reading of the situation. I didn't have any mentor. I didn't have anybody talking about the troubles. I didn't have anybody talking about republicanism. It was just something I developed within myself. And of course, growing up in the United States, the United States is a republic. So I probably, had a Republican sympathy anyway, having grown up in a republic. And so I've always and still maintained strong Republican beliefs, in my own personal belief system. That's basically it. I wasn't indoctrinated. I wasn't, I didn't grow up hearing any propaganda. I didn't really grow up hearing anything except what I heard in the news. And most of the news would have been anti-Republican anyway. So it really was a personal development, how I came to my own, Republican position in life.
Did I get this right? Did you join the US Marines to get experience to join the IRA, or was that just something you did anyway?
I joined to get experience to join the IRA. Well, in a way, you see, I heard that, and believed that the IRA was this highly professional, highly sophisticated force. And but it was mostly from the British that were saying this. So I didn't join the U.S. Marines with a view that the IRA needed my help or anything like that. I wasn't that presumptuous, that I was going to join the Marines, come back, and be this person who was going to improve things. That never crossed my mind. I joined the Marines for two reasons. One was to enhance my professional development. So when I did come back and join the IRA, that I would be well trained. And the other was to test my commitment, because I probably would have joined the IRA at 18, but I didn't know anybody in the IRA. It was a secret army. I didn't grow up in a Republican area. So I decided that if I joined the U.S. Marines or the U.S. Army, whichever I chose when I got there, that after 4 years, if I still came home and still joined the IRA, then my commitment was genuine. It wasn't just notional. It wasn't just an emotional reaction. That it was a genuine ideological commitment. And that in fact happened. I joined the Marines in May 75. I got out on the 29th of May 1979 at 8 in the morning, and at 2 that afternoon I was on a connecting flight to catch a plane back to Ireland to join the IRA. So I was quite committed to that. But again, I want to emphasize, I didn't join the Marines to do anything else than enhance really my own professional development. I kept hearing that the IRA was this highly sophisticated professional organization, and I believe that. So I didn't think, to be honest with you, I didn't think the IRA were sitting around waiting on me to arrive. That never occurred to me, and they weren't.
I just want to say here and now, I was very fortunate when I was in the Royal Marines to spend time with the US Marines, and it was very special. It's so special that we met a load in a place called Sigonella, which is on Sicily.
Yes,
there's a big American air base there, and our ship. I was on ship at the time. Our ship had pulled in. One of the lads said to me, a chap called Steve, he said, "Chris, do you want to go to this American base? It's across the other side of the island." So we hopped in a taxi, and I believe we went past Mount Etna. I hope I've got the right part of the world, but there was some famous volcano in the background, and we rocked up at this base, and we actually met they were having a festival that day. One of these things that Americans and Canadians do really well. They have this big, daily festival, and we sat down to grab a beer, and one of the air women, if we can call them that, came over and said, "Hey guys, what are you doing?" And we're like, "Oh, we're British Marines. We've just come to say hi." And she turned around and went, she said, "Hey, all you US Marines, these Brits are here to drink you under the table." And that just began an absolutely fantastic weekend with these all blokes. Some were from New York, some were from like the mountains, just a real varied bunch. But the one thing that we had uniting us is we were all Marines. So it didn't matter US Marines or Royal or UK. It was just like the brotherhood.
I never worked with the Royal Marines. I was in Marine Recon, and the Marine is the Special Operations Capable Unit of the U.S. Marines, and I eventually became an instructor at the Marine Amphibious Reconnaissance School at Little Creek in Virginia. And I never worked with the Royal Marines, but I was only in the Marines for 4 years. Had I been in longer, I'm sure I would have. But I talked to a lot of Marines who had been with the Royal Marines and worked with them and liked them a lot. But I did train with the Parachute Regiment. I was an instructor. They came over to Little Creek and they were doing some amphibious boat training and things like that. And I was an instructor with them for about 2 weeks. And we got on great. But we went out drinking and had a good time. I'm an Irish Republican, but and that's a political position. But I don't have any personal animosity to anybody, or it's not a personal argument with me, the political struggle between Ireland and the UK. It's strictly political. On a personal level, I can get on with basically anybody, I think, and so no, I mean, people are people anywhere, really. It's the political leaderships and that sort of are the ones that can often manipulate the basic goodness and loyalty in people to do things maybe they wouldn't do if they saw the full picture. You know what I mean?
Let's not mince our words. We've had 20 years of illegal conflict, and all off the back of lies.
Yeah.
We've lost a lot of young men and women because of that. And as far as history is concerned, it's just prepared to keep rolling on and not to even acknowledge it. And did you see any combat yourself in?
No, not in the Marines. No, I joined in May 75 because I was 18 in May 75. The Vietnam War officially ended in April 75, so I missed Vietnam by a month. Not that I wanted to go to Vietnam or nothing, but I mean, I would have had to go wherever the Marines sent me once I joined them, and I got out in May 79. So that was probably the only 4 years of peace the U.S. Marines had, because the year after that they were in Grenada, and then they were everywhere then. But I actually joined at a point that was probably low morale for the American military. Now I found the U.S. Marines. I trained. I went to Army jump school at Fort Benning. And I went to Navy dive school. So I did inter-service schools. But I did find the Marines did have the highest esprit de corps and the most motivation of all the services, in my feeling, in my experience. But you see, in May 75, it was the very end of the Vietnam War. In fact, when I did advanced infantry training, we were training on mock-up Vietnamese villages and all. We were still doing that. There was a low morale in the U.S. military in general. Not in the Marines. I never found low morale in the Marines, but generally in the U.S. military, there was low morale after Vietnam. The military didn't have a lot of respect for the American people because of the Vietnam War. Now I'm told if you're in the military and they see it, they'll thank you for your service and all this stuff. But back then it was a different story. So look, I joined to get training. I got training and I came home. But no, I didn't see any combat in the U.S. Marines. I probably joined, like I said, in the only 4 years that they weren't fighting somewhere.
But from what you said, John, you got a whole load of quite high level experience. I bet that made you probably an exciting candidate for the IRA. Did it not?
Well, you would think so, but the IRA. One of the things that surprised me, well, very few people in the IRA had professional military training. Very few. That didn't surprise me. But what surprised me in the IRA was that people at a leadership level, at a very high level, had no real respect for training. I had no real interest in anything I had been involved in. I was trying to improve training and things like that. And other things I saw that I thought were wrong that could be very easily resolved, very easily improved. And there seemed to be no real interest at the top. In fact, I think they almost took it as a personal insult. They wanted to hear we were the best trained guerrillas in the world and led by the best leadership in the world. And, it was very unprofessional. Now, the men on the ground, the active service volunteers on the ground, were always very keen to learn, very keen to improve and to learn everything they could. But, the IRA leadership actually, Martin McGuinness actually sent me to the States because they had an American accent. And to buy weapons. And I remember at the time thinking, I was an instructor in a U.S. Marine Special Operations Capable Unit. And, I thought I had a lot more to offer than my accent, but they didn't seem to appreciate that at all. Now, there were people, I met people, there were former Royal Marines in the IRA. There were former members of the Parachute Regiment. A lot of IRA men had served in the British Army at some stage or the other, especially in the early 70s, coming out of the 60s and all. There was a lot had been in the Irish Army, so there was a pool of professional knowledge there. There didn't seem to be the managerial skill at a leadership level to do, say, a skills audit, put that together, and professionalize our training. We had, lucky for you and a lot of British soldiers didn't do that. But we had, so we had the school, we had the pool of professional soldiers. We had school teachers. I met quite a number of school teachers who'd been in the IRA. who could, write lesson plans, devise a course structure. And we had artists who could, devise lesson plans and all. It was all there. We had all the ability and the resources there, but it was never put together. It was never used. And I used to wonder about that. But in time, I came to the conclusion that I think we were quite infiltrated by British intelligence. And I believe that we couldn't develop beyond a certain point because certain people were in control who wouldn't allow that to happen. I'm sorry if I'm talking really vague and in circles.
No, John, you're absolutely not.
Yeah.
You're saying this.
I can't be too specific,
You're saying the stuff that I think a lot of us have worked out for ourselves. What was that film that came out about 10 years ago? What I got from this film, it was a very intense film. I think a lot of it was set in Belfast, and a lot of, not horrible stuff was in it.
Yeah.
And then right at the end, the whole like crunch of the film was it was like MI6 controlling it all, Well,
I have to hand it now, I have to hand it to the British intelligence services. They're very, very good at infiltrating organizations. I mean, see, one of the things is if you're an IRA volunteer on the ground, you're trying to stay alive from week to week, stay out of prison. You have no money, you have no resources. It's an extremely precarious place to be. But if you're like MI6, MI5, you're a professional intelligence officer, you have a salary, you have a pension, you have all the time in the world to play the long game. And the British are very, very good at playing the long game. I mean, they have experience of it because of their empire. They're known for playing the long game. And, what they'll do is they might see, say, a dozen IRA volunteers, and they would say to themselves, well, this guy wants to win the war at all costs, but this guy over here, he wants to survive the war at all costs. So what we'll do is we'll take this guy out, get him killed, get him arrested to make sure this guy rises to the top of the pile. And it takes maybe 20 years. So it is a long game, but it paid off in the end because we ended up with an internal settlement, totally in British terms, with Irish nationalism more or less reconciled to British jurisdiction in the north, recognizing the lawful authority of the British Constabulary. Everything we fought against as Republicans, they have accepted. So I'm not saying it was totally the doings of British intelligence, but it played a major role in recruiting people and in turning the entire philosophy and ideology of many people to a place it would never have been. So I just want to emphasize something, Chris. When we talk about the peace process, and I don't support the Good Friday Agreement, and I'll explain that later if you wish, as I'm an Irish Republican. But I do support the peace. I support, when they talk about the peace process, I support the peace, but I'm critical of the process. Because I totally support the peace, and I would not advocate ending that. My problem with the process is that Good Friday Agreement calls for a so-called United Ireland, where the British-Irish cleavage and national loyalties remains intact. And the whole purpose of Irish republicanism for 200 years was to break the connection with England and forge a joint civic identity in Ireland. And basically build a national democracy within an all-Ireland republic, which the Good Friday Agreement isn't leading to. It's a so-called United Ireland, but at the heart, it's divided at the civic level. It's divided because it says you can still be British, you can still be Irish. But if you can still be British, even though you've lived in Ireland for 500 years, that is sort of the, antithesis of what we were fighting for. And I don't want to go into political lectures here or historical stuff. I don't want to go down those rabbit holes because we could be here forever. But the thing about it is, Irish republicanism was actually founded by Irish Protestants. Of the 28 founding members of the Irish Republican movement in 1791, every one of them was a Protestant. 26 of them were Ulster Presbyterians. So how it developed to where it is today, it's a long story, and we can't really sort it today, Chris. But But I know the narrative. I mean, there would be a lot of British people in Union Snow who would say we were wrong, we were criminals, we were terrorists, and and all that. I can write the script, but you know, there's two sides to every story, and every side, tends to have people who believe only their side is right. I mean, it is important to, to listen to the narrative of the other side and try to accommodate that in some way. But you do have to have a bottom line. And for me, the bottom line is the full freedom, sovereignty, and independence of Ireland. Outside of that, I'm quite, open to the views of other people, but I don't believe Britain should have any jurisdiction in Ireland, and it's based on conquest, and I don't believe conquest gives democratic title. But again, that's just, I'm an Irish Republican, and of course I would say that, wouldn't I? So,
well, but it's an important point, John, because, like I said earlier, from my own experience, I never thought we'd get to this position today. No way. I thought the bombs, moreover, the bloody stones that the kids used to throw at us, I thought they'd still be flowing. And of course, I think any rational human being is happy to see that the city's built itself back up.
Sure.
The barriers have come down. People of different faiths can now mingle without
Sure.
fear of, not coming home one night. But I'll say it again, I still find it fascinating that it's still going. Well,
I agree, Chris. I know what you're saying. I mean, yeah, Irish people thought that. I mean, I wish if I had a pound for every time I heard somebody saying this will never end, there's no solution in sight. Well, we still haven't got to a solution, because even though there's peace, but I would refer to, without being pedantic, I would refer to it as pacification. We have pacification. But we don't have genuine peace, because we still have that the root cause of the troubles is still there, which is the British jurisdictions claimed Ireland, and the fact that Unionists who are a minority in Ireland were made into an artificial majority in 1922 by partitioning Ireland. So that's still there, and the hatred and the bitterness you talked about is still very much there with a lot of people. It's very much there. So that's all in the mix. But it's good, that there's that nobody's killing each other. I mean, obviously, that's any rational, empathetic person would say that's a good thing. But whether long term that can last, I'm not sure. I don't believe Republicans would ever re-engage, but I think there is a possibility that if there ever was a border poll and a vote for a united Ireland, there's a possibility loyalists could kick off again. It's impossible to say that when you have the root cause of a conflict not resolved, and it's not, you can never fully say, that there won't be trouble down the line. I hope there won't be. I mean, I certainly wouldn't advocate it, but knowing Irish history as I do, it's just, you can just never, tell what's around the corner. And then Brexit was another fly in the mix, because Brexit, the majority of people in the north of Ireland voted against Brexit, and including unionists. But yet, it's still going to affect Ireland. So it's hard to know, Chris. I mean, I'm obviously I don't have a crystal ball. I'm glad there's no war. But as an Irish Republican, I still would like to reach Irish Republican goals, and I would like to reach them peacefully, very much. So
I mean, I thought on this quite a lot over the years, and I've mentioned this on podcasts. What is the way that a resolution can be found that everyone's happy with?
I don't think that. Oh, sorry, did I cut across you there, Chris?
No. It's just basically that. I mean, I would be looking at some sort of unique agreement. It is a bit of an interesting situation where you have a country and 32 of its counties?
Counties of Ireland as a whole, yeah.
Are controlled by another one, especially one with a history that that England has had. But I mean, I think people recognize that. It's almost as though you can never be whole until you get that. I think people recognize that.
Yeah.
But of course, the fly in the ointment is the fact that the Protestants who lived there also, and I'm quite rightly in their minds, and they've also got a claim.
Sure.
It's almost like, if you look at Australia and New Zealand, they've all had to come together and work it out. The Maoris and the Aborigines I've been in Australia, I've been in New Zealand, and I've met people who are still a bit like this and like that. Yeah. Maoris that are just like, no, it's peace. We love our European brothers and sisters. This is just the way it is. And then you get ones that they won't even freaking speak to you.
Yeah.
You go, hello, mate, fuck off. Is there a solution for Ireland, and by which I include the North? Could it ever be, or are human beings just beyond our abilities?
Well, I don't think there's a solution that can please everybody. I don't think that's ever happened in world history anywhere. I mean, even the United States, when the American Republic was formed, a third of the American population were Tories, loyalists. And they weren't happy with the American Republic, and they wanted to maintain a British connection. And you find that when you decolonize anywhere in the world, you have the Pied Noir French settlers in Algeria. I mean, you always have a rump of the population that's loyal to the metropolitan power, that's loyal to the colonial power, and don't want the status quo to change. You're always going to have that. But from our perspective, people say Irish republicanism needs to accommodate. See, Irish republicanism in a way is the accommodation. Before the Republican movement, the Irish Republican movement was first formed in the early 1790s by Irish Protestants exclusively. The goal of most Irish nationalists, or rebels, or whatever you want to call them, was to re-establish a Gaelic aristocracy, or just put a Catholic king on the throne. It was actually Irish Protestants who came up with the idea that Irish people of whatever persuasion, once they broke the constitutional connection with England, could live together as citizens and have a civic identity as Irish Republicans. Like, I grew up in the United States, and you had your Irish neighborhoods, Italian, German, you had your African American neighborhoods, you have a myriad of cultures, languages, mind-boggling, right? But you have loyalty to one overarching republic. You're a citizen of that republic. You take India with a population of over 2 billion people, has 5,000 ethnic groups, 200 official languages in its constitution, recognized, yet it's one republic. And Ireland, with two basic traditions, we believe can be one republic. But when you have a foreign power in the mix, underrating the supremacy of one side, and the British aren't doing that because they have any particular, love of Ulster Unionists. They're doing it, I talked to a lot of British people, and know many English people, and they would often say, "Oh, we'd leave Ireland tomorrow." If you, and I believe that. But you see, it's the intelligence and security services don't want to leave this massive island on their western flank without having some sort of control here. That's why it was invaded in the first place, so that Ireland would never be a totally independent country that could bring in maybe a foreign power that could threaten England someday. That was always the raison d'etre. And Ulster Unionists is their excuse for staying here, because we have to bear in mind that the plantation of Ireland was only started in 1608, 1610. England claimed jurisdiction in Ireland for hundreds of years before that, when there was no unionists here. So what was their excuse then? There was no unionists. So what we're saying is, to answer your question, Chris, if I can, is there a solution that will please everybody? I don't believe there is, because there's the people who are going to be upset by United Ireland are unionists, right? But there's two Protestant camps in that. One is the Enlightenment Protestantism, that were the founding fathers of Irish republicanism, are a very important part of our national fabric, and without which concepts of liberty, democracy, and republicanism could not have flourished without the Protestant Reformation and the breaking that institutional hold that the Catholic Church had on the medieval mindset for years, where the world was a hierarchy and you had your place in it. You were serf, fuck you, you stayed there. It was the Protestant Reformation that broke that. So it's very important. We recognize, Irish Republicans recognize the importance of that and the value of that Protestant tradition in Ireland. But there is also a Protestant tradition of planter supremacy, where they see themselves as the planters who came here to civilize the Irish, to act as an English civic garrison in this country, and they demand a unique place in this country. And what we argue is, yes, you're a distinct community, but you're not a separate nation. And there can be no unique communities in a republic, because a republic, everybody must be equal under the law. So, you have distinct communities like you have in America, India, in republics around the world, definitely. But, that uniqueness, that supremacy, that feeling that they have from, like the Orange, say the Orange Order and the ones who celebrate the 12th of July and the bonfires and all, they will never be reconciled they will never subject themselves, if they can, to the majority rule of the people in this country. Never. And England still is making sure they don't have to. That is a major part of the problem. Sorry if I'm being a bit talking in circles.
No.
Here. I'm trying to get my thought process right. But to answer your question, is there a solution that will please everybody? There couldn't be, because you're either a unionist or a nationalist or maybe a Republican. But Tony Blair, who was quite slippery, when the Good Friday Agreement came out, he talked about creative ambiguity. In other words, speaking with a forked tongue, they were telling the union, the reason the Good Friday Agreement came to being was because Republicans were being told that this can lead to United Ireland and Republican goals. And the unionists were being told that, you're bringing nationalists into Stormont, you're giving them a stake in the state, and you're actually protecting the union in Britain by making the people who are fighting it inside, working with it on the payroll, and now part of the institutions. So this creative ambiguity has worked so far, but I don't think it can last forever, because at some stage the penny's going to drop. Either the union is safe or it's not, and depending on which way that falls, some people might react to that. I mean, I don't know Chris personally. I simply don't know. I'm just trying to look at things on the round, and I'm coming at it from my perspective as a Republican and my take on history. I know somebody from another community could have a completely different take on it that I have. I do understand that.
Yeah, and I think we should recognize that. There's some stuff that you said here, John, that's really kind of almost like puts things in perspective for an outsider like myself. A view that we wouldn't traditionally be enlightened to in this country. I'm also aware that there's people on the other side of the fence out there that will be upset now.
Sure.
And all I would say is, look, I'm just a podcaster. I love all people. I love John, even though he was allegedly my enemy at one time. And that's just the way I live my life. I don't think war, conflict ever suits anyone. I think we're too smart than that, which is why I asked John, what could be a solution that, you're never going to have everyone that's happy.
No.
But you could find something special that people go, do you know what? We haven't thought of that before, because all these things have been so traditional. You're either this or you're this.
Yeah.
Well, hang on. We're cleverer than that. Than that. But I'll say to anybody out there, we're a podcast. We welcome all views. If you feel strongly about this and you want to come on the show, there's an invitation for you right Absolutely. There. I want a podcast, John, just to chat about things, because I think there's a better future for young people out there. I think when you go wandering around wearing your underpants on your face, locking yourselves in your houses, not driving your car more than 15 minutes down the road, having digital ID, which only will work eventually if it's implanted in your body, because, of course, IDs can swap.
Sure.
Like, I don't think you're going to have the life that I've lived, and I've lived, worked and traveled in 85 countries on all 7 continents, and it's been a blast. And I don't think people are going to find that sense of education and freedom and love for life that I've been fortunate to experience by going along with like the agenda of the World Economic Forum, and they've got Tony Blair in, you know, and oh, what's his name, Bill Gates, and all the people whose only solutions for life are to cut down on people's freedom. Okay. John, could we get down to more kind of just call it military matters, because
sure.
As much as I love peace, I am also fascinated by the whole complexity of war and young men fighting, and even the simple thing of firing a weapon is a fascinating experience that I guess the vast majority of people on the planet will never undergo. And yet people watching this podcast now will want me to ask you about.
Sure.
So like, how do you join the IRA?
Well, that's a good question. How do you join a secret army when you don't know nobody in it? I mean, if you if you were from Belfast or South Armagh or things like that, you would know Republicans. You know, there's a way from like I had a sort of different experience in that I didn't know anybody. But to make a long story short and keeping within legal parameters, I found out about a guy who was working on a building project, and I was told that he'd been an ex-Republican prisoner. So I got a job on the project. I sidled up to him, and within about 2 or 3 days from my questioning and my line with him, he had a pretty good idea that I was interested in joining the IRA. And at some stage, it took a couple of weeks, I actually put it straight out to him that I was interested in joining the IRA. Now, he'd left the IRA at this stage, and he advised me against it. He said, look, you're going to end up dead or in jail. And he also even said to me that he wasn't sure that some of the leadership could be trusted. Now, I had no idea what he meant by that. That went way over my head. And I just thought, well, this guy's just trying to justify the fact that he's resigned and he's just, But, he must have said it to somebody, because eventually a Tyrone man, a fellow from East Tyrone, approached me and said, I hear you're interested in joining the IRA. So what happened then was I had a series of lectures. There was a bit of a background check. They checked who I was. My granduncle had actually been in the IRA in the Tan War in the 1920s. He'd actually shot the last Irish seaman in the Tan War on the day the truce was signed. But he later joined the Guards himself, the Southern Irish Police. So and then his brother, my other granduncle, was killed in the Irish Guards in the First World War in October 1916. So it was a typical Irish family, someone one way, someone the other. But anyway, sorry, Chris, to get back to your question. So basically, after I was approached by this Tyrone man, I had some lectures and interviews, and eventually I got sworn in. You're given what they call the Green Book, and I don't remember the exact oath. I think I wrote it in the book, but you just agree to obey, the orders of superior officers and all that, and that's it. You're in. But there was no progression like you would have in a conventional military, where you do this and then you do this and you do that to be qualified. It was very ad hoc, Chris, very all over the place. Like the Irish say, it was all over the place like a dog's dinner. You could be at anything. And I found when I did get in, the actual training was very poor. Some of the training was actually counterproductive because they're actually telling people the wrong thing. For example, and I do respect that you were in the British Army yourself, or the British Marines, sorry. I remember they were being told in camps the British infantry helmet was bulletproof to high velocity rifle fire, which it's not. And yet this was universally believed. And, that's probably saved the lives of a lot of British soldiers. So it's just one small example. And I could recite many, many, I don't want to get too much into it, where training was actually counterproductive. And also, again, it was very ad hoc. Many of the people who were doing the training had no training themselves, So this professional, highly sophisticated organization that I'd heard about, certainly I had quite an eye-opener. Now, the actual men on the ground were very good. I admired the men. I don't blame them because they weren't trained. I blame their leadership. Napoleon said there's no bad regiments, there's only bad colonels. And I'm sure from your own experience in the Marines, a good leader is everything. Somebody who leads by example. somebody who leads from the front. I mean, that's what it's all about. But if you get some a waste of space leading you, the men are going to end up to be waste of space. You know what I'm saying? It wasn't anyway. It wasn't the professional unit, that I had come to expect. And a few things I experienced, I found that the IRA in some cases were basically armed civilians, not a cohesive military unit, but just a group of armed civilians. Now, there was tremendous bravery. And I know people watching this will say you were just murdering terrorists and you were this and that. And I could break the script. I know what people are going to say. But you look at the hunger strikes and, men there refusing life 3 times a day for up to 2 months and dying horrendous death just to be treated as a political prisoner in a political conflict. But I've seen stuff that will never be public, can never be made public because of the secret nature of the organization, where in a normal, in a conventional army, they would have won the Medal of Honor or the Victoria Cross. I've seen tremendous heroism, and I have to admit, there were people in it who were total waste of space, shouldn't have been in it, very incompetent, were there for all the wrong reasons, as you get in every military. But on the whole, the men on the ground I had tremendous respect for, and my criticism would be with certain elements of the IRA leadership. There were others in the IRA leadership who were found very good. And were very, very personally brave, and made a lot of sacrifices over the years. But again, because they had no professional military training, they didn't really know how to maybe train and organize a military thing to a military group to expand beyond what we were doing. And the IRA was a very low level insurgency. Now, to anybody killed in that, I'm sure that's no comfort. But on the whole, it was a very low level insurgency. It never really. There was no Tet offensives or anything like that, even though there's 3 things, Chris, I've found, or I believe you need to have any hope of success in a military campaign. You need the skill, you need the capacity, and you need the motivation. Now, in the early 80s and that, if you look at the hunger strikers and different things that were gone, the motivation was certainly there. The skill was lacking. But there were people in the IRA with the skill, we had a leadership that could put that still together, but the capacity was lacking. They didn't have the stuff. In the early 80s, the IRA, it's no secret now, it's a matter of public record, had got in massive shiploads of weapons from Libya. It's my understanding, I don't know if this is the fact, but because of the British, this is my understanding from reading, I wasn't told this by anybody in the IRA, but because the British allowed their bases to be used for bombing Libya, Gaddafi retaliated by, giving the IRA weapons and that. But when the capacity was there, the IRA weren't really able to use it. They didn't have the skill to use it. And I think certain elements of leadership wanted to use that as negotiating capital to, open career paths for themselves and not necessarily fight the enhanced war of liberation, national liberation that many of us thought we could fight at that stage. So, that was a frustrating moment for a lot of Republicans, but that's all hindsight now, Chris. That ship has sailed. It's water under the bridge. So, but from my perspective, and the perspective, when I say my perspective, it is my perspective, and I only speak for myself. I speak for nobody else. But I speak. I know a lot of former IRA volunteers, and they would totally agree with what I'm saying. A lot.
Yes, the hunger strikes. My gosh. It's hard to really understand the level of dedication there, is it? If you're an outsider, I remember seeing as kids, people just making jokes about Bobby Sands, to be honest, on this side of the water. But there was a film made about it a few years ago, and I'm always a bit skeptical of films because they come from Hollywood. Hollywood is a place of magic, and they cast their spell on the whole planet. They have a very interesting interpretation or a selective interpretation of history, but you couldn't take it away from these guys. My God, to die for your cause,
and not only to die, but to die an excruciating, agonizing, prolonged death like that.
Yeah.
It was, and so I think it showed the amazing bravery and commitment within a lot of volunteers. It wasn't reflected at other levels higher up. I'm afraid that was unfortunate from our perspective. But it was an amazing time. I was at Bobby Sands' funeral, and by pure coincidence, I can actually see myself in the crowd behind the firing party when they're firing over his coffin. I can see my head stuck there. Now, absolute pure coincidence. It's like something like you see in Forrest Gump. He's everywhere. But I didn't know the firing party was coming out there when it came out. It's an interesting historical, massive funeral. About 150,000 from all over Ireland were there. It really struck a chord. And but it's unfortunate that had to happen. But the British government, Thatcher at the time especially, were trying to criminalize the whole Irish struggle and just basically say that the 800-year struggle in Ireland for national liberation was just an extended crime spree, and that everybody involved in it were criminals, and men had to do that to protect their dignity as Republicans. It's amazing. I don't think I could do it, Chris. I really don't think I could do a hunger strike. So, hats off to them. Amazing. And there was another 30 men willing to die after that when it was called off. Eventually had to be called off. They were just dying to no purpose. And then they eventually got their political status after all that. They got their own clothes. They got the 5 demands they were making at the time. So they had to go through that first, but it was a reflection, of the commitment that some people had to achieving our goals. Bigger commitment than I think I could show.
In this day and age of technology and social media, and sometimes I look at my phone, and because I was using the location app 3 days ago, I forgot to turn it off. And I'm well aware the powers that be, if they want, they know every single place I've been for the last 3 days. In this scenario, it would be a very different thing. Do you think that kind of conflict could be possible in this day and age?
On the surface, on the face of it, it would seem impossible. I mean, everybody, including myself, goes around all day carrying a recorder, a phone. And they have spyware. They can turn on your camera. They can turn on the thing. They can turn it on when it seems to be off. And everybody brings their phone everywhere. And they can, you would think it's impossible. But what I kind of don't understand, and I must maybe study up on it a bit. And let me make it clear. I don't want it to be possible. I hope everything does continue peacefully. But, from a purely military, let's say, academic point of view, we ask ourselves these questions. What if this and what if that? And on the face of it, like I said, you would think it would be impossible with the technology they have. And the technology they have is 10 years ahead of what's on the market. For example, the security services have stuff there 10 years ahead of the latest stuff that's on the civilian market. Like, we don't know what it is. There's no question about that. 10 years from now, we'll be buying it, but then there'll be another 10 years ahead. But what I don't understand, Chris, and you probably have a better understanding of this, is how the Taliban more or less succeeded in Afghanistan. I look at pictures of it. It seems to me to be there's no overhead cover. The place is wide open in a lot of places, and you see it. And how did they more or less prevail against the United States and the UK and the whole world coalition? These guys in sandals and AKs with all the technology and all, that's a question I honestly don't have an answer to, but I often wonder about that,
But first thing there, and it's the same with the IRA. What would Sun Tzu say? Art of War. Respect your enemy.
Right.
When you lose respect and you start to use, racial slurs, or then you've lost the battle.
Sure.
You've lost the battle. But Afghanistan was interesting.
Were you there, Chris? I'm just wondering, were you in Afghanistan?
No, that was after my time.
Yeah.
The closest I got to the Middle East was our ship. I was on HMS Invincible at the time on the Royal Marines.
I've heard of it.
We were the if I just say security detachment on there, I won't.
It's an assault ship, isn't it?
It's an aircraft carrier.
Oh, sorry. Yes,
yeah.
Aircraft carrier. Yeah.
No. I can understand but there was there's been amphibious ships that are specifically designed to detach Marines. But no, that we literally were sat alongside in Portsmouth and say goodbye to all our families and everything, all the emotional right? We're off to war.
Sure.
And we were on ship. We were about to leave the harbour, and it came over the tannoy. Tahira, this is your captain speaking. Just to let you know that the MOD have decided to send the Atlantic conveyor instead, right? It was, I should say, for anyone who's aware of the Falklands conflict, it's the new Atlantic conveyor, not the one that ended up at the bottom of the South Atlantic.
Yes, I remember that.
God rest their souls. And all around the ship, John, in all the matlows, the naval mess decks, all you could hear was just cheering, right? Like, we're going to stay with off.
Yeah.
And in the Marines mess deck, there was 12 guys just stared at the floor like that.
Yeah.
But no, I think before all of this, I don't think the T people, I call them the T people, because if we say that word too many times, we get flagged.
Okay.
But the T people wouldn't do business with the West. No, absolutely no. You know,
yes,
they kept the production of the old, smoky stuff, or should I say, injecty stuff down. They did a really good job of it. Of course, now that's back in the CIA hands. Production has gone through the roof. I think the mandate of the controllers, as I call them, was right. Let's send the Yanks in to smash the hell out of that country, because basically we need the lithium for this electric car myth, as you call it. You know, this notion that if we have electric cars, we're going to save the planet, which is
a lot of lithium in Afghanistan.
Yeah. There's two.
I believe there's a huge. Sorry to cut across you. I believe there's a huge amount of uranium there too.
Oh well, quite possibly, but all I know is that in South America, I think it's between Bolivia, Peru, maybe Colombia. Somewhere in that region, there's heavy deposits of lithium. It's called the Lithium Triangle.
Yeah.
The other place in the world that they found these huge deposits is Afghanistan.
Oh, okay.
Now, if you need to further your new world order agenda, and the next thing is electric cars to keep the people all distracted, sure. Because it's not sustainable. People, electric car, folks, is not sustainable. It's still built in a factory that runs on oil. The batteries are still charged on power plants or power supplies that run from oil. It's smoke and mirrors, and
of course, yeah.
And so, they sent these young boys and girls in there. Not just the Americans, obviously allies. Britain is always going to sign up to the New World Order. Smash the place up a bit, upset everybody, and then literally just left. Literally overnight left all the equipment. Well, some of us are old enough to remember why we went into that. We went in there because it was alleged a certain atrocity that may or may not have taken place, like about 20 years ago in some major cities, right? Was from people trained in that country.
Yeah.
Even a child, I think, would.
Well, one of the amazing things to me, and again, I don't know the ins and outs, but there were 18 hijackers. 15 were Saudi Arabian, and they attacked Iraq. Well, the thing about it is keeping people afraid is important. When I was a kid in America, we used to have these periodic things where you go under your desk for a nuclear thing because the commies were going to bomb us, And then when that was resolved, then they had the new Muslim threat, or whatever they call it, the terrorist threat, they call it, the war on terror. But one thing I find about I know from America, and I haven't been there in a long time, but one thing that struck me when I left America was the feeling in America very often, the strongest country in the world. I mean, nobody could take it on, and yet they're always scared. They keep them afraid all the time that somebody from outside is going to, and so we have to have 14 aircraft carrier groups, and we have to have total world dominance because even though we're only 4 or 5% of the world's population, we have to police the world, And while I admire, the concept of American democracy and republicanism, and I admire the concept of the American Constitution, like I do, their foreign policy is, and a lot of it, it's so strong, so strongly influenced by Israel and things like that. Well, I find too, like, it's very disheartening. Like it's not just a notional thing. I mean, like I have a deep philosophical belief in individual, in republicanism and in democracy, And to me, it's very disheartening the way, governments more and more they don't look at people as citizens. They look at them as either consumers or tax fodder. They haven't, or cannon fodder if they need them for that. But the whole concept of the citizen, of the individual, seems to be eroded all the time. I know that's bad for the future, I think, because
Yes.
if you're either a consumer, you buy our goods, or you pay taxes to us, and that's your only real purpose in life, and then you die. That's basically.
John, can I ask you, just like on a physical kind of level?
Yeah.
I mean, I remember the first time we went out on patrol in Belfast.
Yeah.
We pepper potted, I think or zigzagged out of the gate, because they always said, there's going to be an IRA sniper waiting for you at that gate, because they know you're coming out the gate, right? So we zigzag, we bomb burst out the gate, fell into patrol formation, and it was quite surreal, especially I think it was like about 6 a.m. The sun was just coming up over, over this part of Belfast. And then nothing really happened for a week. And we really fell into feeling lackadaisical. Like, what was all that training that we did? We've done all this training, shooting, bombs, and we're just in a major city, or we're certainly in the outskirts of a major city, and everyone's getting on with their life. And literally in one day, everything changed. My particular troop, or multiple, of which we were a 4-man brick, we got moved from a place called White Rock.
Yeah.
The name a lot of people will know, to Gerwood Park, which is just off the Ardoyne, or not far from the Ardoyne. And so we were supporting another company, basically. We patrolled out the gate about 11 a.m. or something. As we patrolled out the gate, the IRA blew up the Sanger, the observation post, on the back road. I think it was New Lodge Road. I might have got that wrong, but behind the camp.
Yeah.
And those booms you hear all over the city.
Sure.
And so we just went in, straight into the drills, cock your weapon, take cover, look around, obviously trying to identify any, the firer or whatever. And it ended up that we went back in camp. Now, we stayed in camp all day. That evening, we went out to protect the ballot boxes, or the voting process, because traditionally the IRA, because it's British democracy, but they try and interrupt it.
Yeah.
And we got up there into the Ardoyne, and we had a conco with us as a continuity officer, because we were so new. We'd only been in the north there for 2 weeks or something. And they attached this army officer from the unit before to show you all the ropes. And I never forget, he went, "Right, fellas, we won't go down this alleyway because it's renowned for IEDs. Break into diamond formation, we'll just go across the park." And as I stepped foot on the grass, the rounds just started coming down. And again, immediately, "Take cover!" You could hear the firing mechanisms echoing off the walls around this park. We dived behind this building in the middle of the park. It was like, I don't know, it was like caretaker's building or something. Or Jock, who was our tail end Charlie, was just spark out in the middle of this field. All his equipment was thrown off him. And I was the first aider. I mean, not only that, just part of your Marines training is you never leave a man behind. You're trained to do fireman's carry in your training. That's you've got to be able to carry a full grown bloke and all his equipment.
right.
200 meters in under, I think, 90 seconds or something, right? And so I started running back out for Jock, and it all was a bit disarray. My multiple commander shouting, "Chris, get down, get down, get down," and I'm like, I can't do that, Like, anyway, cut long story short, but Jock popped his head up, and you could just see the shock in his eyes, and he just jumped up, grabbed his electronic equipment, grabbed his rifle, and come running over. So I'm hit. I'm ripping open his combat jacket and his we called it a Neba vest, flat jacket.
Yeah.
And I, mate, you're not fucking hit. You're not hit. He's, I'm hit. I'm fucking hit. I'm hit. Right? Again, cutting a long story short, I know the name of the IRA chap who, from the back of the Ardoin, had fired on our patrol. He'd hit Jock 3 times, then turned his sights on me because I was the next guy at the back, basically the closest guy to him. I remember seeing the ground going, just like in the films. And one round had gone through Jock's weapon sling. One had taken the antenna off his electronic equipment. And the third one had hit him not in the fiberglass plate that we had, but just above it. And it spun him round with such force, all his equipment just flew off him, John, And it was just one of those moments of reality in life where you think, oh yeah, this is all pretty real.
Yeah.
This is, this is pretty real. I think we had one of our chaps shot dead in the next week. My buddy was on top of the flats. I can't remember if it's the New Lodge flats, but he was up there. There was an SAS patrol doing observations in the place at the time, and an IRA ASU come round the corner below, just leveled up a machine gun. Don't ask me how you do this, but they did, and they just let rip at the observation post.
Yeah.
And my friend said to me, is actually my best mate back then. He said, "Chris, we're all like scrabbling on the floor trying to get to the radio and send a contact report." He said the SAS guys were like, kicked open the windows and just started firing down at this. John, it all got very real. It all got very real. I think.
Said genuinely, I'm not just saying this because you were in the Royal Marines, but for your own information, I've talked to many IRA fellows about the different British units in the north. Just curious their opinion on them, and they actually, and I've heard South Armaments saying this too, that the Royal Marines had the best tactics. That they actually had a lower casualty rate than most because the tactics used, like the pepper potting, bomb bursts, movement, they sort of kept that up the whole time. Whereas other guys that get lazy, I don't want to, point fingers, maybe the Welsh Guards, the Royal England Regiment, they get lazy after a week or two, and then they'd start taking casualties. But apparently, and I've heard this from several sources that the Royal Marines were tactically, their tactics were good, So that added a bit of professionalism, I'm sure, saved the lives of your people on a number of occasions.
Yeah, I got Jock. He'd done a few tours before. I think he'd done 2 tours before. He's certainly done one in the south. And the first thing he told me is just keep your weapon up all the time, as if you're just about to fire. Yeah. None of this like having it down. Just and that's what we did. We just kept our weapons up all the time. And the second thing he says, you never stay still. Never stay still. You're all, and unless you're behind cover, you're moving. Yeah. On the last,
the area weren't like very highly trained in shooting, so a moving target is obviously harder to hit. So that would have stood to you from your perspective. That would have been a good tactic on your part to keep moving. Definitely.
The final week, where you're thinking, "Oh my God, I might get home alive now,"
Yeah.
This is, and at the end of any tour, I think any service person will tell you just want to go home. You just want to go and have a beer with your mates and get rid of that extreme tension every single day. And on the last week, we had a briefing, and our intelligence officer says, right, folks, the intelligence coming in is there's Semtex in every lamppost. Now, I know that's a bit extreme, but I think the point he was making is you need to take it that anything can go bang, right? The IRA always said that they were going to take a Marine out on, this tour. We'd lost one chap already, that's a fucking eye opener, That last week, I didn't go near the lamppost. I walked down the white line in the middle of the road.
Yeah.
Just still zigzagging, just minding the cars as they get used to him about, they know, like, just let the British Army do what they're doing, because it's not worth upsetting any of them. But yeah, it's crazy, just crazy, John. What was it like for you as part of an ASU going out on patrol?
Well, we didn't patrol like that, but it would have been mostly, setting up operations. And for most units like that, we've been hoping the Brits came to you. You didn't go to them, sort of type
like
of thing.
A quick hit and run sort of thing.
That type of thing. But my experience of it was coming from Marine Recon and my training, and the intensive training we had in ambushes and counter ambush drills, to the IRA it was so ad hoc, it was so lackadaisical. I mean, very often there was no plan. People just diddy-bopped, walked across fields. South Armagh was different now. South Armagh, they would check every field. Everything would be checked. They did great reconnaissance. They had real command of the ground, the landscape. And that's probably why it was the most effective unit we had. But in other areas, no, people just walk across fields, and it would be just, as I say, it was like a case of joining the IRA in Ireland by night. You'd just be walking across. No tactical training what to do if you were hit by the Brits. No tactical training how to counter an ambush and that type of thing. I'm sure you did a lot of that training, counter ambush drills. How basically basic military tactics just weren't trained in the IRA. Basically how to move, shoot, and communicate as part of a cohesive team. You bring in maximum effective fire on the enemy without hitting each other. That's the basics about tactical movement. That's it in a nutshell. IRA had no training in that whatsoever. It was really just, I'm amazed more IRA men weren't killed, to be honest with you. And, I remember being on operations where I was more worried about the guy behind me shooting me in the back accidentally than I was about running into the Brits. And I'm serious about that, but I don't want to make out like the IRA was stupid, nothing like that. I mean, they were basically civilians who joined a good organization. Personally, many of them were very brave, but it's not their fault they didn't get the training. It's not their fault. It's the fault of, people higher up than them that should have been doing their job, in my opinion, But, the professional training that you would have had, the IRA would not have had that, sometimes capable snipers in that would appear in areas, and they could use a telescopic sight, and they had, basically they were good shots, but then that man might be killed or captured, and that tactic would disappear in that area because the IRA was very poor at organizational learning, at learning as an organization. It very often depended on individuals who had a particular skill or ability, and if that person, for some reason, was marginalized, taken out, or killed, that could disappear. So totally different organizational culture than a professional army, definitely. But again, there's other things. There was no tours for the IRA. Some of them were there 20, 30 years. There was that anxiety and tension was always with them. You had the men who died in hunger strike. You had men who went to prison for many, many years, suffered horrendously, maybe on the blanket protest, the dirt protest, came out and re-entered the IRA and would maybe be captured again. And so, it was a different type of courage and a different type of commitment, but it was still courage and it was still commitment. On a whole, I'm speaking generally, it was very ad hoc. They were very capable in South Armagh. Quite capable in East Tyrone, and different areas would be capable depending on a certain maybe leadership figure appearing, and then if that person left, then they would lose that capability. Whereas, I'm sure in the Royal Marines, if you had a really good sergeant and something happened to him, you all didn't collapse because that sergeant was gone. You had organizational training, you had organizational maps which to proceed. I think, to me, the mark of a good leadership is it produces more leaders. If you have a leadership that just produces followers, that's not a good leadership. And we tended to have a leadership that produced followers that didn't really countenance, new leaders coming up that could maybe threaten their position. That was one of the problems I saw. But a good leadership. I'm sure in the Royal Marines, you remember when you were training to a certain standard, you were always looking for leadership material, looking for people. And when they were promoted, people weren't just promoted because somebody liked them. They were promoted because they met certain standards and criteria that they had to pass, and they had to perform, and they had to be accomplished. You didn't have that in the IRA. So, the lack of professionalism really what was an issue, was a problem. But it was made up for in other things, like commitment, like courage. Some of the things, the sacrifices you went through as a volunteer. You never had money. I remember, every Christmas when I had my dinner, I'd always think, the first bite in my mouth, will I be dead or in prison this time next year? Well, eventually I was in prison, and I did a couple of prison sentences. But that's it. You pays your dime, you take your chances, as the Yanks say. And, if you don't want to go to jail and you don't want to get killed, don't join the IRA. That's a good first step,
Yeah, it should be mentioned there that we were all adults and we're all volunteers, we volunteer for this stuff. Also, should just mention that I never seen blokes work so hard in all my life as what we did when we was over there. Yeah. Some guys, I think, ran themselves into exhaustion. Yeah. Just the sheer, it was a hot summer. That 89 was a hot summer. Yeah. It was blistering hot. You had all this equipment on.
I was in prison at that time myself.
You used to just sweat through it all. It was pretty insane. But did anyone ever go, "No, I don't want to do this one, Sergeant"? No, never. No. It was bang, boom. The briefings were always so professional. The intelligence gathering, it never. But that's what we were. We were professional.
For example, you'd have done, I'm sure you'd have had what the Americans called after action reviews. When something happened, you'd have reviewed what happened and and learn lessons for the future. The IRA almost never did that. So even though the IRA, you talk about 30 years of experience, I found that you could join the IRA maybe 20 years into the war, and none of the previous experience would matter to you whatsoever, because you wouldn't have heard about it. At least you had a good officer commanding or a good OC who would bring you through. But it's it all could have been done, but it wasn't done. And it's those small things that frustrated me. I didn't expect. No, I never expected or thought that we were going to do D-Day landings on the coast of England. You know what I mean? But in a small, just professional improvements in our effectiveness as an organization, that's what frustrated me more than anything. Another thing that frustrated me about it was the capability was there among the men, the willingness was there among the men, but it very often wasn't there at leadership level. And I think there's a lot of reasons for that. But one reason I've come more and more to believe is that British intelligence were doing their work, and in a number of cases, they had the right people there. They had the people they needed there. And
just a bottom dollar question here, mate, or a direct question, I should say. When I look at all those bombs that went off on the UK mainland.
Well, like the Guildford bomb, Birmingham, that was long before my time. They were horrendous incidents and shouldn't have happened. And it's no comfort to the relatives of those killed that it wasn't meant to happen. It was a result of, again, it was typical lack of attention to detail. Maybe 3 pay phones in a row are vandalized. By the time you got to a phone that's working for a warning, it's too late. It's silly things like that got people killed sometimes too. Ridiculous. Shouldn't have happened. Again, had people been more professional, it wouldn't have happened. But there's no question. There is no question. And I'm not absolving the IRA of responsibility for things they did that were bad things. I'm not at all. I wouldn't do that. But there were cases, and I think it's going to come out in the next couple of years more, where the dark hand of British intelligence was involved in a number of these incidents. Definitely. And all it did was rebound badly on the IRA and put the IRA in a terrible position in world opinion. It didn't help us, and it was never IRA policy. I know people will go mad. They'll probably go on your program now and say, "What's he talking about?" But the IRA did not have a policy of killing innocent civilians. It happened. But it happened almost exclusively due to incompetence or poor planning or lack of attention to detail. But as a policy, there was never a policy. And I remember in the IRA being warned again and again and again: whatever you do not risk civilians. I was told that constantly. Now, I wasn't told that in the U.S. Marines. When I was trained to call in artillery, naval gunfire, and airstrikes, and I did it in training. Never once did anybody say to me, "Geez, whatever you do, don't hit a civilian." Mm-hmm. So that's it. But again, that's the thing I don't like talking about too much. For the simple reason, if anybody's listening who lost a loved one due to the IRA, saying the IRA didn't mean to do it, that just adds insult to injury, and I realize that. But I would, Chris, never would I have joined an organization that deliberately killed civilians. I just simply would not have done that. I mean, that's okay for ISIS and these lunatics, but I'm a Republican, I'm a Democrat, and that's not where I. And you want to look back, Chris. You want to look back on your country's struggle for its full independence and get there someday. And you want to look back with pride at what you did. And you can't look back at pride with murdering innocent civilians. Nobody could do that. And the British killed many innocent civilians around the world, and many things they did. But I'm sure many of the British soldiers involved in that. For example, who would deny that the American and the British troops who attacked Fortress Europe on D-Day, who could deny that they were doing the right and just thing? I mean, I don't think anybody could deny that, taking on Nazi Germany. 20,000 French civilians were killed in Allied bombings in the Normandy campaign. And I'm sure, should those soldiers bear culpable responsibility for that? I don't think they should. I think they could stick their heads up in pride for what they've done. And, as far as the civilians were killed, I don't know who bears responsibility for that, but I don't think that responsibility should be on the shoulders of the infantry soldier who was fighting the Nazis. Just as I don't believe the responsibility for some of the atrocities that the IRA accused of doing should be on the shoulder of every IRA volunteer, who the overwhelming majority of were never involved in an operation that killed a civilian or anything like that. I mean, I personally was never involved in anything I'm ashamed of or can't stand over, and the vast majority of IRA men can say the same. But there were a small number of incidents where that didn't happen, and it's a blemish and it's a stain on our struggle, and we wish it hadn't happened. But unfortunately, sometimes it did happen.
Yes, John. What I wanted to come on to was, it's two things really: the fundraising issue, and we used to hear stories of in the Irish bars in New York and Boston, and that they'd literally hand round a bucket, for the boyos, and people would chip in. I always found that a bit hurtful, to be honest, because I thought, do you guys really understand what's going on over there? That people are losing their lives, and the other thing is, were you arrested on the ship?
I was. Well, on the fundraising, I was never involved in that fundraising, so I don't really know. When I was over there on an arms mission, my instructions were to avoid Irish bars, don't go into Irish. I had to avoid all that at all costs. Mm-hmm. So, but you have to bear in mind that in America, after the famine, by the late 1860s, there was over 1 million Irish-born living in the United States. They were living in a republic that had thrown off, the British rule. In the past itself, they were, gathering resources. I mean, Ireland at the time was in squalid poverty. 1 million people had died of starvation during the famine. Because one crop had failed, all the other food that was in Ireland, plentiful, was being sent really to feed England. So there was a lot of hostility, and that hostility for that Irish nation in the United States, it had a tradition that was sort of carried on. You know what I mean? You're right. I mean, a lot of people didn't know the ins and outs of the situation, but it was an emotional response. For example, in America, I'm sure Jews contribute to Israel, that type of thing, even though they might have no connections with it, no connection whatsoever. A lot of Irish would be the same, but most Irish fundraising, as far as I know, was done as prisoners' dependents and all. I don't know where the money was going. I honestly don't. But I don't. know of cases where people really come on book and saying this is for the IRA. I think that's a bit of a cliche. It's a bit stage Irish that it may have happened, but I never heard it. But I'm not saying it didn't happen, but I think it was mostly prisoners and that type of thing. Now, I don't remember any prisoners getting any money, so God knows where it went. And some people in the IRA leadership later became very suspiciously wealthy. But yeah, I was arrested on the Marina Anne off the coast of Kerry with 7 tons of weapons. We were trying to bring it into Ireland, and but we were informed on, and we were caught by the Irish police and Navy, and I got 10 years for that.
Was that coming from Libya?
No, that was coming from the United States, from Boston.
Okay.
Yeah. No, I wasn't involved in the Libyan arms shipment.
What did you feel when, I'm guessing you were boarded by customs? Did you think?
Well, police and well, I mean, my first feeling was, Irishmen were arresting us for weapons that we were bringing in to fight the British occupation of Ireland. But my overwhelming feeling was they were waiting on us, so somebody told us. They were waiting at a specific spot. You see, I was given the coordinates, longitude and latitude of a specific place to be in the Atlantic, 200 miles off the coast of Ireland. I didn't know the boat coming out to meet us. I didn't know where that boat was going to in Ireland. But they were waiting behind the Skellig Rocks outside Kenmare Bay, where we were heading to. I didn't know we were going there. Nobody in the American end knew that, but they knew. So right away I knew. But eventually that informant was outed a few years later. And he boasted about it later. His name was Sean O'Callaghan. I don't know if you've ever heard of him, but he was working for MI5 and the Garda Special Branch. So yeah, he sank us. He did. That's what I mean. The British are very good infiltrating, very good, and they'd had him there for a long time before he caught us. He did a lot of damage to us, a lot of damage over the years. Yeah. And,
where did you serve your time, John?
In Portlaoise Prison in the south of Ireland.
Oh, really?
10 years there in Portlaoise Prison in the south of Ireland. Yeah. And then when I got out, I was only out for 20 months, and then I was caught in London. We were planning to disrupt the electricity supply in London as an economic target against the British economy. And again, I strongly believe there was an informant involved there. I have my reasons for believing that. The British deny that and say it was a result of surveillance, but they always say that anyway because they don't want to point the finger at an informer. But from things that were said to me during interrogation, I firmly believe an informer was involved, or else and I got 35 years for that. And so I got a total of 48 years in prison sentences, of which I did 14 and a half. Now, when I got to 35 years, I was in Belmarsh, and then I was in Whitemore in different prisons in England, all in the special security units, the top SSUs. And I was eventually released 4.5 years, I think 4.5 years later under the Good Friday Agreement, which was great to get out, And, sometimes people say to me, well, you should be grateful to the IRA leadership for setting up the agreement and getting you out of prison. Because I'd have still been there, Chris, to this day. But, I'd have been more grateful if we hadn't been riddled with informers and we had accomplished our mission without being caught, I didn't want to be in jail and I didn't want to get killed. But at the same time, to hear some people talk, you would swear that the sole purpose of the IRA campaign was to end it, to find this peace. And to us, peace would eventually come when we had an end to the root cause of the conflict in Ireland, which we looked on as the British came to jurisdiction in our country. I'm not fanatical. A fanatic doesn't have a sense of proportion. I mean, I do have a sense of proportion, and I do know there's other views of the conflict. I understand completely. But I believe that, the Republican analysis is the correct analysis. However, I do believe no one except that other people have their views as well. And I'll discuss that with anybody. I didn't know you, Chris, when I was invited, and I was told you were a former Royal Marine and all that, and I didn't know. For all I knew, you were going to come on and eat me alive, or try to, or whatever. But like I said, I have no problem talking to anybody about this. I'm not ashamed of what I've done. I'm proud of what I did. I wish we had achieved our goals, but like I said, everybody's got a point of view, and I like talking to people, and I like hearing their points of view. If you, well, anyone, I mean, if one, just stays within their own mental orbit and won't listen to anybody else, or like I go out of my way to read papers that are hostile to republicanism, and that because I like to read what they're saying. I like to get sort of my head around their perspective, because you have a better chance of winning if you understand who you're fighting and why they think the way they think. But people who just read or study to confirm their own prejudices never can break out of that. No, you just can't break out of that mindset. And so that's basically it, Chris. In a nutshell, I think that's the way I look at it anyway.
Yeah, and you've been very forthcoming, mate. And it's like I said to you before, I think we push record. Communication is everything.
Sure.
And we've got to talk about these things,
Absolutely.
And we've got to understand other people's perspectives. Otherwise, we're never going to come to a resolution for the next generation.
Yes.
The final thing I wanted to run by you. This was one of the most fascinating things I learned from my time on service over there, and it was all to do with the IRA quartermasters, who obviously had a big job because they had weapons coming in from here, from there, from as we discussed, Libya, and of course you got to hide them somewhere if you're in a. If you're in an underground conflict, you've got to put these weapons somewhere. And we had experiences that in Belfast. A search team would go in. They'd literally pull back the carpet in someone's front room, and there'd be a hide under. And of course, by the time we got there, I think we found one shell. Like empty shell or something. Other times we found a lot more, a few barrels full of explosives, a few AKs, this sort of thing. But one of the most fascinating things I heard was that there was a chap, he come up with this theory that the quartermasters had a code or a sequence. This is not the right words. And someone managed to crack it. When you went to let's say a field in a countryside, and there was intelligence there was an IRA cache in this field, they worked out this clever system that the quartermasters were using. And it was something like, and don't quote me on this, it was a long time ago, but it was, if there's like an oak tree in the field, a big old oak tree, you went to that oak tree, you went a certain amount of paces from that, and then possibly you went on another bearing, I don't know. And apparently this guy cracked a lot of finds, found an awful lot of weapons by using this system.
There'd be a lot of truth to that, but I never heard of a system or a particular code like that. So many paces from the tree and so many paces that. I never heard that now. But I do know that if you had stuff in a field along a riverbank, whatever, you had to have some frame of reference in the dark to find it again. So you would have to have something like that, or, you couldn't find it. And it would also have to be something that was permanent. Like you couldn't have a particular hedge that a farmer could cut down, and the next time you go, it's gone. So like an oak tree that's been there for 200 years is probably going to be there in another 5 years. You know what I mean? So there would be a lot of truth to that, Chris. But I admired people who kept weapons, because I was in houses, and people who kept weapons, and people would say sometimes, oh, how active service is so dangerous, and you could risk prison, and we really admire you. But I would think, no, I admire you because I can take a break. When I'm not in active service or a volunteer in active service, like we can take a break, we can go somewhere, we can put the feet up. But 24/7, you've that stuff under your floorboards. You can never relax. So, well, sometimes maybe they found it hard to understand how we could put up with the stress of our situation. I kind of sometimes thought, well, how do you put up the stress of yours? Because you're always in trouble. If they come in and find that, you're fucked. Like, excuse my French, But so it's swings and roundabouts. I mean, I suppose just different people have different different character traits that make them good at some things and bad at others, But yeah, I certainly admired people who kept stuff because they were always in danger. But I never, like I said, Chris, never heard of that particular code. But you've got the gist of it, right? You would have to have some marker you could find. I mean, that's nearly obvious, and it's possible maybe he was in an area where a particular quartermaster did that. That's quite possible. That's quite possible. I don't know for sure, but I certainly wouldn't say that's not true. It has a ring of truth to it. Yeah. Well, the key to control through history is dominating the narrative. Like, if you can control and dominate the narrative, that's what control is all about. And the people that do that don't like anybody who challenges that narrative.
No.
And that's the thing. And yeah, I look back. That's one of the reasons I'm a great admirer of the Enlightenment. And like I remember reading about Galileo saying, it was Galileo that the Earth went around the sun didn't go around the Earth, and this was blasphemy. And he was brought up to a trial in the Vatican. This boy could have been executed for this belief. You know what I mean? How he fought his corner and all, because he saw the obvious truth, and yet every person in the world, every educated man, every man of learning said, no, that's not the truth. But he saw the truth, and we all know the truth today. So, sometimes, a lesson from that is sometimes a perceived truth is not the truth at all, and people have to question even what's perceived as the truth at times, and to question things. I think questioning is good, and that's why dialogue is so important. And it's important to question things and to examine your own conscience. And anybody who believes they have all the answers are dangerous people, as far as I'm concerned.
John, on that note, can I thank you so much for coming on the show?
Thank you.
Like I say, communication is everything. I wish you all the very, very, very best, and I'm sure our paths are going to cross in the future.
Hopefully, Chris, and I wish the same to you. Yeah.
Thank you to John, and thank you to you guys for listening. Like I say, if you've got something to say, folks, rather than get all upset and start making accusations about people which you know are not true, just ping me an email, and if there's something we can do on the show, something to further the peace process, and create a better lives for the little ones, then I'll look forward to that.
Thank you, Chris. Thanks, Chris.
You're welcome, John. Massive love to you all, friends. If you can like and subscribe, we'd really appreciate it. John, stay on the line so I can thank you properly.
Thank you, Chris. Yeah.
Cheers, folks.